Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I have a poem to read for you. Chaos, mother of invention, the rainbow serpent, the song we were born to listen to become friends with, to become lovers. Chaos, you glorious creatress, you beautiful, colorful nature, you animal divine. I ride you and breath, learning how to live, learning the art of living. The other night at our party, we had poets in presence, and I asked a poet to write a poem about chaos, but I qualified it. I want you to write about chaos in a good way, the instigator of change, the most positive way to move forward. Her eyes lit up, and this is the result. So high five to whoever brought poets to that party. I want to talk to you about containing the chaos. Chaos is scary, it's intimidating, but like we've learned through the last 2 days, it is inevitable. And if you can contain that chaos, you can harness it for good. I am the Senior Director of Product Design at Vox Media, and that means that my team works on the Chorus platform. Chorus is the platform that our family of networks live on. So all of these wonderful brands are able to publish their words and their content on the Chorus platform. We've also started bringing on outside brands to the platform. We've been selling access to our platform to brands like Funny or Die. That's where it all started. And we just recently brought on Chicago Sun-Times. We launched that a couple of months ago. We brought Deseret News on, and then just last week launched P. Diddy's own Revolt.tv. Prior to Vox, I've only been there about 4 months, but prior to that, I led the brand redesign at MailChimp. That included moving the brand forward into the future. It included moving the marketing site over to a CMS, and it included moving a team of brand and marketing designers into a new system that was very, very different than what they had experienced before. Prior to that, I was at a company called Big Nerd Ranch. There was a blip of me living in a van and running an agency as well. But at Big Nerd Ranch, I came on to build their design services. They're an app development company that also teaches and writes books on app development. I was brought on to build up their design team. And after a few years of that, I became VP of engineering because I could see how operationally we could all work better together for that company. Before that, I was at WebMD when pharmaceutical advertising was getting the crackdown from the FDA. And so we had to figure out how to make money or else our team wasn't going to grow anymore. Before that, I opened the Atlanta Digitas office where we had clients come on and new writers, new designers, new account managers, all converging in a new space, in a new effort. And before that, I was at J. Walter Thompson. I was working on the Ford account when the government was bailing out other motor companies. It was a scary time to be there, and we were not sure if growth was going to happen again. And what I've learned through all of these amazing experiences is one inevitable truth. Growth causes chaos. It's the great instigator of chaos. And chaos causes confusion. Who does what, when, where? What are we doing? Chaos causes mistrust. People's motivations get a little confusing. Land grabs can happen. It can get ugly. Chaos can cause redundant work. Oh, I love that presentation you did. Here's mine. I just did the same thing. Chaos can cause low focus. When you grow and you have tons of new things to focus on, you spread out all of your people and they start to work on things that are not aligned, and your priorities start to compete, and you lose focus. And your momentum goes down, and your quality goes down. When everybody's spread out, when there's confusion, it's hard to ship quality. You don't have the systems in place for oversight. Growth impacts teams as well, not just companies and businesses. New humans that are thrown together have to learn how to build trust with each other. Roles get confused when you add new humans into a mix. People come with past experiences, they come with past expectations around what job titles mean, what roles mean. The C-suite gets in the weeds. It's a little bit fun for an executive to see a bit of chaos and say, I remember chaos. I'm going to tell y'all what to do. But that causes chaos in its own right. And then processes quickly become inadequate. What worked for 5 people, for 20 people, no longer works for 100 people. And your communication channels start to fail. Meeting in the hallway is no longer okay. It doesn't get the job done. Maybe even leaning on Slack too much gets out of hand. But also, growth impacts individuals. That fear of change is real. Fear of change is something that we're born with. Some people crave change. I'm one of those people, sorry. But also, the people that fear change, it can freeze them. Chaos can freeze them. They have a sense of a loss of control over their own destiny, and that's scary. Their momentum can go down, and they can kind of back away, participate less, feel like, it's pretty crazy over there. If I just kind of move back and sit quietly, maybe it'll pass. And you start losing your star players like that. And eventually, it can lead to attrition. I'm a fan of healthy attrition, but chaos can cause attrition across the board. But resilient teams weather chaos. There are tips and tricks on how to weather chaos. When you weather chaos and you build resilience in your team, you increase confidence in who's doing what, when, and why. You build trust through communication, alignment, transparency. Resilient teams are focused. They know what the big goal is. They understand where everybody's going and what everybody's roles are. You also get predictable quality. Sure, there are going to be ups and downs, but there are systems in place to ensure that what you're shipping meets a certain standard. Chaos can also be pretty good. I'm a pretty big fan of chaos. It creates impactful autonomy. If everything is structured, and if everything is written down, and everything has a process, and everything has a few steps that you follow, you miss out on independent thinkers bringing their great ideas to the table. So allowing a bit of that chaos in and controlling it allows those autonomous rogue workers to have impact on the org at large. It also creates innovation, and that innovation has a place to go when your chaos is contained. You need the creativity that chaos can bring, and that needs somewhere to go. And creating pathways for that innovative thinking to get into the roadmap and to ship is incredibly important, or else you're going to lose your star players and your creative thinkers. Chaos naturally rewards intrinsic motivations in people. Chaos creates opportunity. People can lean into the growth that your team is seeing and say, I was kind of thinking about maybe becoming a manager. Or, I would really love to lead this initiative. Or I would really like more experience with the research team. By that growth and that chaos, you're allowing people to see opportunities that aren't there if everything is structured and static. So let's talk a little bit about containing the chaos. I have some hot tips for you. Number one, nobody actually knows what they're talking about. Everybody up here on the stage was nervous about their talk. They were nervous if their facts were going to hit home. They were worried that maybe they were stating the obvious. But what's really great about it is that by all of us working together and stating some obvious things to us, it might be helpful to somebody that's just learning that framework. Or by reframing something with our own experiences, we're able to glean interactions from that. So I'm going to walk you through some things that I have found work pretty consistently for me. I've been at a lot of companies. I've done a lot. And this is my bag of tricks. Hopefully, you'll find something really useful out of it. We're going to talk about communication. And we're going to dig in a little bit about what I mean about communication. It's not just make sure you're talking to each other. It's more complicated than that. We're going to talk about alignment. And it's not just, are we all using the same processes? It's more complicated than that. We're also going to talk about failure. Much like my affinity for chaos, I also have an affinity for failure, and that has taken a great deal of practice and therapy. To set context a bit, let's talk about org maturity. A lot of models for org maturity are pretty linear. Envision has really great materials on this. But I like to think about org maturity in cycles. That means that no matter if you're a 5-person organization or you're a 500-person organization or a 5,000-person organization, you're going to spot patterns. And they follow this model that Bruce Tuckman created in 1965, and I love it. It's called forming, storming, norming, and performing. Teams go through these phases, and I'll explain them for you. Forming is when teams get together. That could be a new company. That could be a new project team. That could be a new discipline team. During that forming stage, everybody's a little polite with each other. They're getting to know each other. They're overly kind to each other. Everybody's excited about the initiatives that are coming together. Ambiguity reigns during this time period. Those folks that are really excited about squishiness and figuring out what the problem is we're solving love this phase. The next phase is storming. This is where people start to notice the flaws of their coworkers. They start to be a little judgy about what other people are bringing to the table. In addition, they start to speak up a little more. That initial politeness is gone. They've started to assert themselves, bring their opinions to the table. And that means that personalities can start to clash and disagreements arise. And you have to start learning how to work together. And then after you figure out how to work together, you get into the norming stage. Norming is where you start to appreciate what people are bringing to the table, how their skill sets complement what you bring to the table. You also start to write stuff down generally. This is when you think, we should probably have a process for this. And this is when that stuff happens. Also during this stage, the people that are really excited about the ambiguity of the forming stage start to get a little itchy. You might hear phrases like, you know what, it's getting really corporate around here. After norming, you enter the performing stage. And this is where you're running like a well-oiled machine. You can rely on and lean on your teammates to have a shared understanding of how things work, how things ship, what people's jobs are, and how you fit into the entire picture. My friend, this does not stay. The smallest change can fit you right back into the forming stage. Let me tell you a little bit about the Chorus design team. This is what I just inherited 4 months ago, and so I've studied a lot about it. The Chorus design team started as a scrappy group of designers, product managers, engineers in a room, literally in a tiny apartment in Austin, Texas. And that team built a beautiful publishing platform. And they worked with networks. They brought on more and more networks onto this platform. And they suddenly realized, oh, we've grown. We're a little chaotic. And so they had to norm a little bit. They split the cell into the editorial team and the audience team. So they were thinking about who are our customers. We have editors that are creating and publishing stories, and we have audiences who are reading those stories. They have wildly different needs, but there's a really great platform in the middle of those customers that makes it all work. That editorial team came up with a design system for the tooling, and then that audience team came up with a design system for the components and templates, and things were running really, really smoothly. That team is performing. And then we decided to throw a wrench in it. And we added a services team. We thought, this platform is pretty great. We should probably offer it to other people. And so we added another team. And that services team is, in a lot of ways, a parasite off of what the other teams are doing, and an instrument of chaos, because customizations on client executions mean that the Harmony team has to rethink how the design system works, and the audience or the editorial team has to rethink how those configs work. And so it was such an agent of chaos, but it was a beautiful thing because it tested the resiliency of these systems and these teams, and it also forced us to go through that cycle of maturity again. And so just like that, there are a few triggers for this cycle. One is starting new teams. even if it's within an established team. That well-oiled machine of chorus was thrown for a loop when we added the services. Every team was affected, whether or not they were on the services team. Adding new people can do this. I am absolutely an agent of chaos in that organization right now. I just started 4 months ago, and I have opinions. And so adding new people can throw this for a loop. New types of projects. If you look at Chorus, again, we had a product, there were long timelines, it was easy, not really, but it felt that way. And then we added services, and everything was different. We had clients, we had timelines, we needed to figure out discovery phases that we could sell. And so everything changed because our project types changed. And we all know this intimately. Reorgs cause chaos, utter chaos. And that can trigger that cycle of forming, storming, norming, and performing again. So you can kind of figure out where you are on the maturity model here by a few things. Asking yourself, where are we now? By understanding where you are in time and being honest with yourself about the maturity of your org, you can apply these tips appropriately. Not all of these tips are going to be applicable for the size of your team, the maturity of your team, or where your team is ready to go. It's important to learn how you got here. What strong personalities in the company's past created the culture that you're dealing with today? What business problems were solved in the past that got you to the product that you see today or the agency that you see today? And then ask yourself, where are we going? Be really truthful with yourself about the kind of business you're creating, the kind of product you're creating. You can reference roadmaps, goals, things like that. But where you came from and where you're going are wildly different things. And what got you to where you are may not get you to where you want to go. So ask yourself, how are we going to get there? Is it going to be the same culture that we've had? Is it going to be the same people that we've had? What changes do we need to see in order to get to where we're going? How does our business need to change in order to accomplish our goals? Now, if you're the old guard and you got change happening around you, there are some things to keep in mind. Be aware of limiting beliefs. If you hear yourself thinking, but we've always done it this way, take a step back and open your mind up and pursue a growth mindset. And if you hear your colleagues saying things like that, gently coax them into this growth mindset. By being okay with learning and with evolving and changing, you can make progress. Give away your Legos. If you're the old guard, go read Molly Graham's article on giving away your Legos. The poor summary is that as a leader, you have certain tasks and roles in hand that you are used to or that you feel very comfortable with. But as your organization grows, you also want to grow with it. And the way to do that is to create a succession plan. Figure out how to give away those tasks and those roles, those Legos, to someone that's new to the organization or someone that needs to move up in their own way so that you can pursue new Legos. You can start to grow in different ways. Are you the new kid on the block? Take a minute and observe your organization. Where did this org come from? You were hired for a reason. You were hired because you have ideas and frameworks and structures and leadership styles that are going to be useful to this company. But without the context of where this company came from and where this culture came from, you might be instigating chaos that isn't helpful. And figure out where the business is going. Notice I didn't say figure out where the org is going, because by being informed about where the business is going, you can think about how the org can follow. Don't forget, you may have somebody's old Legos. They might have feelings. So just be aware of the relationships that you're coming into. So as you know, as we discussed over and over again, it's gonna happen. So prepare for growth. Pressure test your systems. Black Mirror that shit. Figure out the worst case scenario for what could happen. If you doubled the amount of people that have to use this workflow, what's gonna happen? If you brought on double the amount of clients, what's gonna happen? if you lose your star player, what's going to happen? Document that process. Get into that norming stage so that you can get into a performing stage so that you can build resilience for when chaos comes. It might feel like overdoing the process. I think I've heard some feedback about like adding more meetings, adding more documents. Do this strategically. Evaluate where you are in the org maturity and add documentation as necessary. You want to be prepared for how you're moving forward. Time box strategic thinking. If you're in the rhythm of things, it can be really hard to stop and take a step back and think about the future. But gather a few key people and give them 2 days in a room and give them a problem to solve, and this strategic thinking can start to work itself into your culture. Build up the mental health of your team. I won't spend too much time here because we've talked about it a lot, but by building resilience in your team, you can start to build a resilient org, and then you can start to build a resilient company. And that starts with mental health. Make friends. Reach out to your cross-functional teammates. Take them to lunch if you're in person. If you're remote, just randomly set up some meetings with them. Spend 30 minutes, an hour, talking about your dogs. Figure out what you're doing on the weekends. And then eventually, talk about their pain points. Figure out what's hard for them. Start to build empathy and relationships for your network, because you are going to need that network to be healthy when you go through change. And don't fear chaos. It's okay. Chaos is good. Start to build a relationship with chaos in a way that makes you excited about it. When you start to feel things getting a little crazy, you know it's time for a different kind of thinking and a different kind of problem solving. And so when that happens, you can weather the chaos. First of all, acknowledge the chaos. Don't pretend it isn't happening. Don't pretend it's temporary. Don't pretend it's never going to happen again. Talk about it. Normalize it. Neutralize it. Have a plan. All that work you were doing in the preparing for chaos stage, have a plan. Bring it up. You're absolutely going to have problems that weren't accounted for in a plan. But as a leadership team, it is our job to think about the future, not just be reactionary to the present. Communicate early and often. I'm going to say this over and over again, so get used to it. But talk to each other. Talk about the challenges that you're seeing. Talk about the outcomes that you would like to see. Talk about the goals and the roadmaps and what your team is going through. And then realign when necessary. This is something that companies do maybe like once, maybe twice, or when chaos hits, this might happen, but you need to constantly be realigning because things change. Roles change, people's capabilities change. You need to constantly be revisiting alignment in your organization. Be clear about the company that you're becoming. Over and over again, I have seen companies hedge about the business that they want to become. They've kind of avoided being frank about the fact that they want to make money and they want a certain kind of user. It's important to be honest about the company that you're becoming. You want your team members to also want money. You want your team members to also want to see us, or to see the company serving the right users. And by hedging and saying that you're not becoming more corporate or that you're going to continue to have foosball in whatever room, those kinds of things create damage when you're not fulfilling them. And then, after you feel things calming down a little bit, you've weathered the storm, learn from what happened. But think about systems. The people are absolutely a part of the system, but be thinking about the system of the organization, the system of the chaos. What things happened systemically that created behaviors in humans? Retrospectives are a great example of this. Retrospectives can be used to figure out what went wrong on a project, but it's often used to say, that person did a bad job. But what systemically allowed that person to spiral like that? How can we support the system so that the humans in the system are supported? Double down on your customer goals. Keep these things in mind. As you grow, this is going to get more complex as you add more user types, more product features, but double down on aligning around customer goals, especially after you've weathered chaos. And then reward and recognize strategically. What behavior do you want to perpetuate? Reward it. Figure out what people's intrinsic rewards are and their extrinsic rewards, and follow suit. So, I have some hot tips that are around that communicating, aligning, and failure. The first one is choose your words. It's amazing how people use the word design differently. It's amazing how people use the word alignment differently. It's really important to kind of fish that out in your organization. Do you all agree that certain roles or words or goals are actually being used in the same way? Consider your audience. As you communicate, whether it's to executives, to your reports, to your cross-functional peers, consider how those people will be digesting information. Your executives need different information than your reports, but they all need to be aligned in what the general message is. Build context. Walk around the brain. Talk about who, what, when, where, why, and how. One of the most magical and simple ways that I find to communicate is to make a Google Doc and literally write who, what, when, where, why, and how. I might switch what up to the top, but I fill that out. And it makes me validate what I'm doing as a leader. And then I share that doc, and as it blossoms out, people respond and they say, oh, wow, this is great. I feel incredibly prepared for this. Be prepared to repeat yourself. I know Alistair got feedback about he repeats himself too much, but think about the different ways people learn. Andy talked about this a little bit. Think about the auditory learners, the visual learners. Some people need to see charts. Some people need Google Docs. Some people need to sit with stuff. Some people need to experience some chaos so that what you're sharing makes sense. So they need to build context before they hear you. So be prepared to repeat yourself. Explain the roadmap. I've seen this time and time again. All right, we have a goal. We're going to ship this feature. And the why is really left out. But what your team actually wants to know is, all right, what's the business doing? Where are we going as a business? And how do our customers fit into that? Because what I've observed from customer research is that they're having trouble with this one feature that I'm really passionate about. And so if you have a conversation with them about, yes, that feature sucks, but our roadmap is currently aiming for this type of customer or this feature release. Let me explain to you why that feature might not be on our roadmap right now. It's incredibly powerful and empowering. Learn to deal with dissent. Ugh, it's so uncomfortable when people disagree with you. Learn to have that conversation. Learn to interact with your report or with an engineer that's on that other team, or with your product manager who has a very different idea of how to move forward. Learn to interact together with disagreement. Practice having conversations where you disagree, and that is okay. So figure out how to create a safe space for dissent, because when someone doesn't feel free to disagree, they start to retreat, and they start to have fear, and they start to look for another job. Increase transparency. You're going to see this one a couple of times too. And what I mean by this is reveal your motives. When you talk about the business and you talk about the product roadmap and you talk about the compromises that you're all making together and you exercise transparency at a high level, make your bosses nervous. It's great. People feel more empowered and informed. And they're able to say, is this the right company for me anymore? And they're able to join you on the conversation about whether or not the changes are working for them. Seriously, increase transparency. Ask yourself, what does this person need to do their job? What info does this person need to do their job? This is generally where a lot of managers stop, and a lot of executives feel like this is all people need, but that's not true. What they also need is information enough to feel secure. This might be different for different people. Some people really want to know the financial health of the company they're working for, and you need to be comfortable having that conversation. Other people really need to understand what I'm doing about that rocky relationship with product management, and that is the security they need. So be transparent appropriately for the motivations of your team. Prioritize those that are most impacted first. If you're making changes to your org, talk with the people that are affected. Make your Google Doc, and then have a one-on-one conversation with those people. Then radiate out from there to the least impacted group. And ask for feedback on your communication. Is this good enough? Am I being transparent enough? Do you feel empowered? Do you have too much information in your head? Do you stay up at night worrying about the business? Because that's not my goal. Another tenet here that I've figured out is create alignment and maintain it. Agree as a group to seek improvement. If you don't believe that there is room for improvement as an organization, it's really challenging to make change happen in a positive way. And when chaos comes, that rigidity is going to cause breakage. Standardize the way you do things. This is getting us into that norming and performing area. When you grow, it can be easy for teams to silo and use different tools from each other and use different methods and processes. And to an extent, that's necessary, especially if there are different project types. But have a baseline that you can all share so that there is familiarity. That does a couple of things for you. That allows people that are switching teams to have something to grab onto. And that means that when you deviate, it's very intentional, and you can hold people accountable to reporting back on that deviation. You know what, I used this new tool and it was amazing, and let me tell you why. And then you can make decisions as an org to level up together. Tell the C-suite they need to back off. Build up the courage to have the hard conversation with your executive team and describe to them the chaos and the harm that they can cause when they swoop and poop. Create a code of conduct. Remember that strategic time boxing? Use something like that to work together to describe the behaviors you want to see as a team. And then hold each other 200% accountable for sticking to that code of conduct. If you agree to be respectful and you witness someone not being respectful, call them out on it. Dig up that courage and hold your team accountable to it. Create buy-in by coming to the table with strong opinions, loosely sketched, with formed ideas that are very informal. This is important. If you come to the table with a deck that is got infographics and every consideration that you have thought of has been mapped out, no one's gonna play with you. It's hard to collaborate when somebody else has done all the thinking. So my technique here is I literally break out the markers and the sticky notes, and I sketch, and then I take an iPhone photo of it. We're a fully distributed team, so I literally pull this ganky photo up on my screen, and I share it, and I say, all right, this is what I'm thinking. And I have to walk somebody through my weird sketch, because it doesn't make sense on its own. But I'm creating this passion with this other person that I'm interacting with, and they start to get bought into this idea, and it's just sketched, so they can start to add their own sketching to it. And it creates this really magical way for you to have collaboration, but having that strong opinion in the beginning allows me to come to the table and form that conversation. Prioritize role clarity. This is also something that I've seen a lot. I'm a person that loves doing a lot of stuff. By the way, I love that forming stage. I love ambiguity. I love this is weird, this doesn't make sense, let's get in there. And so when I get to a company that's norming or performing, I kind of wreak chaos because I'm like, hey, we could also change this in these ways. But what I know too is that it's important that everybody kind of knows what their job is. It's important that they know what other people's jobs are. When I joined Vox Media, we have product managers and project managers and our research team and product designers and engineers and content strategists, and I had to learn what everybody did. Even though I have an expectation of what those roles are, it's different at Vox Media. It's different everywhere. And so I have some tips on creating role clarity. Again, when you come to an organization, there can be some overlap in these different roles. I generally love to do my own research. I'm a geek about research. But when I enter orgs that have their own research team, I just get all up in their junk. And so it's important for us to draw lines and boundaries. And as you grow, you add specialists. And when those specialists come in, they start to take other people's Legos. And so you have to kind of figure out whose toes you're stepping on and what you can do about that. So you need to create alignment on and agree upon what people's jobs actually are. This might look like job descriptions or career laddering, but a tool that I love to use is a RACI. RACI charts are very corporate things that people kind of peel back from sometimes. But I've also found that a ton of people in design haven't heard of RACIs. Nobody at Vox Media knew what a RACI chart was, and so I was stoked to be able to bring it to the organization. It stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And it's used in different organizations to create clarity around roles. It creates alignment about what titles mean and about what roles mean, because sometimes those can be a little different. It forces decisions about ownership. This one was incredibly important when MailChimp was going through that website redesign. We had a core team of 7 people, and we had to figure out who the decision maker was. And so we built a RACI. RACIs instill confidence. People know. It's in there in writing. They know who to go to. They know who the final decision maker is. And so there's dialogue, but there's very little dissent there. So a RACI chart looks like this. Along one column, you write tasks out. This could be wireframe, homepage wireframe. This could be IA. This could be set up client call. You can determine the granularity that helps you. Along the top, you put out the responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed labels. Under responsible, this is the person that's doing the work. So the designer, the front-end engineer, product manager, the person that's actually doing the task. The accountable column is the approver. This is the decision maker. There should be one person in this column. If there are 2 people, it's wrong. So go back to the table and make a fucking decision, because there needs to be one decision maker. Under consulted, these are people that provide data, analytics, inquiry. It could be a research team that's providing you audience insights. These are people that are feeding and informing what you're building, what that responsible person is doing. Under informed, these are stakeholders, people that need to know about it, but that don't need to get in the weeds. Them being on the chart makes them feel better. There are a few different ways that people approach this. MailChimp loves the RASCI. This was the first time I had run into RASCI. I hate saying it. But it importantly adds this column, supporting. When you have a researcher and a designer working together, perhaps the researcher is leading the insights calls, but the designer is absolutely a partner in interview question creation or in synthesizing data. And so that supporting column can be pretty useful if you have complex tasks like that. Another model rearranges the words a little bit and adds the word omitted. If you have a CEO that keeps getting in the weeds, put them in the omitted column. Have a conversation with them about why they are in the omitted column. Another hot tip is failure. Let's fail. Failure is uncomfortable, but man, it is awesome. I've been in companies where things seem to be going okay, and then something starts to get a little weird, and I try and push on this process or push on that team or create some alignment, or something just isn't working and it's not clicking and I'm not getting traction on the ideas that I'm bringing to the table. And what I really need to happen is failure. Something needs to fuck up here. Because failure is about the long game. Failure, viewed in the perspective of the long game, is a moment for you to see what's breaking, what's not working, and how can we improve it in the future. Failure isn't about this finite moment in time where nothing exists after it. The world keeps turning, that maturity model keeps cycling, and Failure helps you prepare for the next time you run into this sort of chaos. Failure creates alignment faster than anything I have ever seen. Whenever I am having trouble aligning with people or having trouble getting on the same page about what isn't working about our process, one good failure and everybody understands exactly what the problem is. So let's talk about failing well. First of all, expect failure. Know that it is a part of this process. It is going to happen. The sun will rise, you will fail, your team will fail, your business will fail, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't keep going. So when you have a growth mindset, failure is an opportunity to be curious. It is an opportunity to learn and to figure out systemically what isn't working so that you can continue to improve. Failure should be experienced together. Avoid pointing fingers, avoid looking at the RACI and saying, well, according to this, you were the one responsible for that. It should be experienced together and addressed systemically. So focus on those systems, not on the humans. Again, what part of what you're doing allowed this human to fall into this vulnerable position to trigger failure? It's a beautiful thing because you can support that human through failure and let them know that it's okay and that their weird, innovative thinking that didn't work this time is absolutely what you're looking for, but also that systemically improvements can be made. So to quickly recap, communication, alignment, and failure are in my bag of tricks. Whenever I arrive, I say, how are we communicating? You're using words differently than I do. Okay. And we get aligned on communication. And with alignment, figuring out role clarity and what we're doing is incredibly important. And failure can be the great instigator to forcing all of this to happen. Thank you so much.